Please welcome Executive Vice President, Global Strategic Clients Group, Oracle, Jonathan Tikochinsky.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. Oh, fantastic. So first of all, welcome. Thanks so much for coming. We're going to talk about the thing that everyone here is doing in transforming your businesses. Right? We talk a lot about solutions. We talk about what outcomes you can get. But that bit in the middle, just before between you finding a solution to having that fantastic outcome, could be quite challenging. So I thought I'll take the opportunity to talk to some of the transformation leaders in our industry that could just share with us what they're doing. So let's welcome everyone on board. Please, we have Sarah Shortreed. Good to see you. Thanks so much. Thanks. Yeah. So, first of all, instead of just keeping everyone waiting for 5 minutes when I introduce everyone, why don't we start? Sarah, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your project that you're doing?
Well, I like to say, hey, I'm Sarah from Canada. I'm from IT, and I'm here to help. But, you know, usually the head office people don't laugh very much at that one. So, I work for a little company in Canada called ATCO. We have about 23 billion in assets. We're an asset-intensive company, a federated holding company, and the majority of assets that we hold are utilities. We operate utilities from the Yukon to Australia. In Canada, we are largely in the Alberta marketplace. And here in the US, we operate the electric grid on the island of Puerto Rico, which has been in the news quite a bit with the most recent storm. So, but in addition, we also offer many other companies that we hold that offer the necessities of life, water, shelter, energy, food. I'm missing one, but you know, along those lines. So we have a lot of things in the holding company, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. Olivier, please.
Yes, thank you, Jonathan. Well, first, I'm humbled and honored to be here with this illustrious panel. I'm grateful for your interest and curiosity. I am responsible for the people technology and people analytics function at UnitedHealth Group. I'd like to pick up on Sarah's comment, a little company here in the US, about 380,000 employees, approximating $300 billion in revenue on an annual basis, focused on something for our US participants here you're probably aware of, which is health insurance. It's the largest payer in the US, named UnitedHealthcare. But the second business platform, Optum, is probably one of the biggest brands that no one's ever heard of. Inside of Optum, we're focused on healthcare delivery. So we have a massive network of clinics and urgent care centers across the country, employing thousands of clinicians. We are focused, we are the third largest pharmacy benefits manager in the US, and we have an emerging healthcare technology and services, which is B2B, called Optum Insight. So that's the business platform, and the transformation we're going to talk about is focused on the HR space.
Yeah, thank you so much, Olivier.
Yeah.
Naveed.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having us over here today. My name is Naveed Anwar. I run digital for Citi in their trade and treasury department, which is basically focusing on institutional clients. Oracle is one of our very strategic clients that we run their treasury for payments and receivables, for trade needs, for commercial needs. And really my organization focuses on customer-facing platforms and data within the organization.
Yeah, thanks so much. And Greg, thanks for coming.
Yes, again, thanks for having me. My name is Gregory Rousseau. I'm responsible for finance transformation at Albertsons Companies. It's a national grocery chain. Most people may not recognize that particular name because we own a number of banners such as Safeway or Vons, Jewel Osco, Star Market, and a number of those brands. And you know, my role is trying to get the organization into the current generation of technology. Grocery stores are not known for cutting edge technology on the back end. But because of the way the world is changing very quickly for us, we need to adopt some of those new technologies, and we're well on our way. So,
yeah, thank you so much. And our very own Leah.
Hi, I'm Leah Yomtovian. I lead our corporate operations strategy team, and we really focus on customer success. Safra says all the time that customer success is our North Star, and so in order for us to deliver that, we've had to transform our business, first from a product-oriented company to a service-oriented company, but then we actually had to transform how we engage with our customers and our operations from end to end. So we power our entire business on Oracle's cloud applications and infrastructure at this point.
No, thanks so much. So I think it's fair to say that we talk quite a lot about technology here in Oracle. We love it. But for us, it's also an enabler, and it's an enabler for you guys, right? I'd rather not talk about the technology to start with, but talk about people, talk about culture. Can you talk about what that means for you in transformation? How do you focus on changing the culture? How do you get your people on board with that change? Sarah, maybe you could start us off.
Yeah, I'd be delighted to. Thank you very much. Because, ATCO was founded by one guy who had a trailer. And he had a friend going to a remote workplace, to an oil field, and all of a sudden that became a business where we rented trailers and specialized in remote workforce housing. So you think about that entrepreneurial spirit in light of a utility bureaucracy where we're trying to change the utility industry 75 years later. We're really working with our people on a transformation level to bring back the entrepreneurial spirit. And we think that that's what makes our project successful, when every individual who's on the project feels like they're that original founder with the original trailer. Of course there's regulators and of course there's big process and all that, but can we put ourselves in the mindset of the entrepreneur?
Oh, fantastic. And Olivier, obviously for you that's easy. You focus on people on a daily basis.
It is my responsibility, yes. But that doesn't make it easy, right? That means I'm solely focused on it, and sometimes I'm engaged in a bit of a tug of war with the business leaders that I'm trying to influence. So we're very early in our transformation journey, so I can't give you lessons of success. I can just tell you the approach that we're taking and the two worry beads that I have that are culturally related, one of which is kind of a business mindset that we're trying to change, one that consolidates decision-making authority at very high levels in the organization. Of course, we're implementing software and retooling processes that want to empower decision-making deeper down. So we're already in a tug of war around how decisions are going to be made in the betterment of the company when the top leaders of the company don't control them. The second sort of cultural push is how we view our workforce. From the easy part, right, being part of the people function or HR, is that we see our workforce as much more than units of productivity, but we have historically managed our workforce very tightly on a set of KPIs. We've paid against that, we've performance managed against that, and to make that shift, to help our business leaders recognize the skills and experience beyond the role and the potential that's largely untapped in a workforce the size that we have, as a vehicle for growth. So that's the angle. We're trying to take the business strategy that focuses on three core capabilities: consumer centricity, internal collaboration, and a tech-forward mindset, and tell a story about how unlocking the potential of every one of our UHG employees is the key factor for growth. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, fantastic. And how does that work in a bank? In a big, complicated bank?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, working in a regulated company and then trying to have a global reach, you got to look at two aspects. First, what are you trying to transform, and what are the cultural things that you have to put in place to make your customer successful? Because everything that we do, we keep our client at the center. And then the second thing is, who are the people within the organization that need to be mobilized to actually help you build that strategy? So one of the things that we can say that culture needs to be in place before a strategy can be executed, which means have a lot of patience. And it's not just lip service in having one or two sessions of like, hey, we're going to have a cultural change. You got to have leaders who are vulnerable from the top. You got to have leaders who are speaking the same language. And you have to have patience that this is a multi-year journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So that's the way that we look at it in a financial institution.
Cool. And Greg?
So we're in a little different area. So if you think about it, in the grocery, our customers are front and center. Our people are with our customers every day. We're not remote or separated. So we have to react very quickly to market conditions. So the retail and the grocery business is very competitive. So if somebody will sell something 20 cents cheaper, your customers are going there. So we have to react very quickly. So we're constantly changing. So when you start talking about transformation, we're always in that kind of mode of moving. And then what the challenge for us is the back office is where we're doing the transformation now. And that group is usually the kind of the bedrock that doesn't change much, because they make sure that those stores are taken care of, our employees are taken care of. With COVID, we have 300,000 employees. We have to deal with safety. We have to deal with all these kind of things. So we're constantly changing. Now, getting the back office to move along those dimensions, usually would be a challenge. But with our particular organization, we were bringing Safeway and Albertsons together, so we never really stopped.
Wow.
So we went from that to COVID to something else. So our group is kind of rolling along as it is.
So you had the momentum behind
We
you.
have the momentum, yes.
So that's very necessary.
Yeah, and just to build, frankly, I have to stop. If you have any questions, you can go into the event app and write them down, and we'll try and find as much time as we can to take as many questions from the audience as possible. So I forgot to say that, so apologies. But going back to what you guys just said, you talked about transformation being continuous, right? You're talking about a long journey, a marathon. How do you do that? How do you keep people motivated, right? And maybe Leah, you have to keep me motivated, which is hard.
I've been working on it for 8 years now, and we're never transformed. We're always transforming. How do we keep people motivated? Well, the first thing is we're constantly focused on who do we serve. So throughout our transformation, it could be our customers, it could be our employees when we're going through the HR transformation, as an example, could be our partners. So we look for opportunities to celebrate success. We bring back success stories. That's one of the best ways that folks stay motivated, but we also look at new opportunities, and I think people get excited when they see there's an opportunity to use an emerging technology like chatbot or machine learning and AI and to be at the front of it. So we bring back the feedback, we look at the new innovations, and folks are generally really excited to continue to focus on what matters most, which is the customers.
Yeah, and how do you do it, any of you?
One of the areas that we try to do is look, as an organization goes through transformation, you need to break them down into bite-sized chunks and celebrate small wins, even if there is a small win, because that's what really motivates the people in your organization to go to the next level and give even more. Because look, all the work really happens in the trenches. And if you're celebrating the folks within the organization and showcasing them the impact that they're having at the client end and bringing back that feedback, that starts a virtuous cycle within the organization, which needs to be celebrated.
Yeah. Sarah?
I think this is one where setting up an actual operational process and a governance system is really important. We can't keep pushing everybody to work every weekend and see it as like a crammed-in project. It actually has to become a way of life. And the great thing about the cloud is it becomes very predictable. You know you're getting a quarterly drop. Mm-hmm. You know you have to take so much time to assess it, so much time to test it, and then you have to do a retrospective on the function feature mix and keep up with that. Yep. But if you really drop it into an operational schedule with a certain amount of governance around it, we have working committees that meet every 2 weeks. We have a steerco every quarter. We've got it in our capital budget cycle, and we know it's happening, and it's super predictable. And that takes a lot of the stress out of it.
Oh, so you're saying that the predictability of the cloud and the fact that you have functionality drops on a regular basis actually eases it, makes it easier.
Because now you can say, okay, we're going to do as much as we can get done next year for X dollars, and we're going to always, once the functions and features are there, we'll make a decision within so many months of whether we take them or not, and then they better fit in that budget, or but it's not, then we're not cramming it in for next Saturday.
Yeah.
I'd like to pick up a little bit on Leah's comment about finding, or about the excitement around being an early adopter. I think it's also an interesting risk mitigation strategy, right? If you understand in an organization, you'll have friends and family who want to be early adopters, who are ready for less than perfect, who are willing to learn and iterate and help you perfect. And it also is a safety blanket for those who are super risk averse, because they know that colleagues are going to find the bumps and work through the kinks, and by the time they can adopt, they will have a hopefully predictable and smooth transition. So I think recognizing that the difference in tolerance is a strategy that can be deployed really effectively.
And I'd like to take it to a slightly different challenge. If you look at us, we're a big, complicated company made out of different divisions, different groups. Many of you are quite similar. I was thinking, how do you create that balance between the different factions? People talk about business versus IT, or I have one division that has one interest versus another. Greg, what's your thinking? What's your magic sauce for that?
Well, it's interesting because we do have manufacturing, distribution, stores, pharmacy, e-commerce. So we have a pretty diverse portfolio of activities. Real estate. I often joke to people that we're a real estate company that happens to sell groceries, right? Because we're everywhere, and you have to own, and we're building buildings and shopping centers, so we have that going on with us. A couple things is, you got to recognize where people are at. Not everybody wants to be part of the transformation, and I think we all recognize you need the people that are day-to-day who want to focus on just coming in, doing their work, and leaving. But then you also look at the people who want to make change, and to your point, there's some that you got to bring along, and some that are ready to go. But for us, it was really about communications. So when we brought up, and I know that's an overused word, but when we brought up our ERP system, we purposely said we're going to focus on the retail sector. And we told the DCs, the distribution centers and the manufacturers, you're part of this. We need to understand your needs so that we have a solution for the future, and that you are on the path. You may not be the first one to come out, but you can bet you're the second or third. It's not that we left you behind, because what I've recognized in our groups is often retail road, it was the tail that wagged the dog, okay? And everybody else was kind of like, we'll get to you sometime. We never got to them. Okay, and this time we took a different approach and said, you're part of the party. You've got to be at the table. You may not be the first out of the block, but you definitely are the second and the third. So I think by including them, knowing that they were part of it, was a big difference for us.
Yeah, and Naveed, how do you drive that?
Look, I completely agree with Greg. You got to bring all the parties to the table, but before you bring them on, you got to have joint goals and KPIs that you're going to go after, and those can't be in silos. It can't be that my group is hitting my metric, but overall we're missing the metric. So it starts with what I call is taxonomy at the top. If you are going to be transforming, you need to be able to know that you're not going to be able to go back. Because the moment you have that fallback, then everyone is like, oh, this group is going to be here for about a year, and we're going to go back to the way that we're doing business. So having the right taxonomy, having the right message from the top, and then making sure that it proliferates throughout the organization is necessary. The second thing is you got to have engineering, architecture, service, your client success people, product design, all sitting at the table and coming up with a strategy together. Because if you don't, then you're not building an end-to-end solution. And lastly, you got to make sure that you are doing this in a way which is showcasing some quick successes, as I mentioned before, bite-sized chunk projects, making sure that those successes are being seen with the impact. Those are the three ways that we are approaching transformation within the organization.
Yeah. And it was interesting when you said, we're not going back, right? How do you achieve that in reality? How do you stick to that? Because the moment you go back once, no one believes that anymore. Any thoughts from anyone in the panel?
I've got a couple comments on that one. So, again, getting that ball, that momentum going, right? And the best way for me to describe it, we had a legacy system, and we had the new Oracle system. And it said, I remember somebody actually from the Oracle team told me, it's going from an Apple phone to an Android phone. It's not the same. There's no going back. When you get an Apple, it's an Apple. Well, I don't have that feature that in Oracle. In the Google phone. So what? It's gone, right? And so when you take that away, they start realizing there is no going back. And it takes a while, because I will tell you, during our implementation, I felt that there was times that people said, oh, this isn't going live, so I get to go back to my old way of doing things. And the reality hit pretty quickly that we're not. We can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you take that away from them, that there is no going back, it's like cutting off that bridge so that they can't go back, then they accept it.
To add on to what Greg just said is, one of the major things that you have to do as part of a transformation journey, particularly in a technology organization, is that we've got many and thousands of applications live in production, but sometimes when you go and ask, what are these applications doing and who are they serving, you get crickets, right? Like people don't come back and respond. The moment you switch them off is when you find out does someone actually care for it or not?
Right.
So having an inventory of what do you need to optimize and what do you need to rationalize and what do you need to deprecate is a key element of defining your target state architecture and then moving towards that goal.
Yeah, it all sounds very organized, the way you, us in Oracle, we're fantastically organized, but Lara, what's your perspective on this?
You know, we actually started from a different perspective, which is, let's say we start with the customer, the employee, the partner, whoever it is that we're serving, we start with what's the journey that they should go on. And when we haven't started from that perspective, I'll give an example when we completely messed it up. It didn't go well. So for expenses, as an example, we had business and IT coming up with different ways that we should make the move from on-prem to cloud. We didn't stay focused on the people that we serve, which is our employees. And so we turned on a bunch of features and functions with advice from some of the folks who were excited to use the functionality. Things like, oh, select from a drop-down menu of 130,000 employees who you had lunch with. I mean, performance was terrible. Or itemize your hotel bill and tell us how much was spent on lodging versus food versus taxes. I mean, our employees were sitting there manually calculating this and putting it into the system. The result was hate mail. Like, hate mail to me, to Doug, my boss, to Safra. So we quickly went back and we said, what did we do wrong? And it became obvious. We started with all the different ideas that everybody behind us had, rather than thinking about who do we serve. And very quickly we said, okay, obviously our employees want to get paid back as quickly as possible for something they spent money on for business. How can we make that possible? What features do we want to turn on? And we took advantage of the quarterly updates, so we got access to the chatbot functionality, and we said, you know, I think employees would really prefer to take a photo of their receipt, text it in, and submit it, they're done, and get paid back. So that's kind of how we also balance the business and IT perspectives. Instead of choosing between them or letting them all win out, it's really, let's focus on who we serve, and let's take every opportunity to get the feedback, use it to improve, use the quarterly updates and the innovation.
So Jonathan takes it all the way back to the culture discussion, right? Because if you think about what was described there, the difference between designing for the practitioner or for the administrator of the process, who of course wants the itemized receipt because it makes it easier for them to manage, versus focusing on the consumer. It's very easy for us to think about the consumer externally, very different to think about what consumers you have inside of your own organization. And that's been part of the planning here around identifying an employee with multiple cohorts or multiple personas. You know, supervisors in the HR space are an important consumer, business leaders and practitioners, and trying to figure out how to strike the balance. But unfortunately for my colleagues, practitioners are at the back of the line, right? They're not the most important consumer in this kind of a transformation.
One of the things that we've implemented across the bank is, while we have NPS as well as voice of customer to which we react and change our roadmaps and give features out, we've implemented NPS internally for our internal tools and platforms as well. Because that's very necessary, because our number one customer starts with our employees. They're our first testing bed. When we're pushing a feature out, they are our first set of testers. They're giving us feedback to making sure that they can be more productive in the experiences that we're creating, which ultimately serve to our customer base. You got to have an NPS score, and we look at religiously to see, are we improving or are we actually deprecating the experience?
Yeah. It sounds very structured, right? I said again. But I think for me, one of the things that's really interesting is many of us know what we want to achieve in a transformation journey, but we're not always sure how to know that we're getting there. How do you measure success? What do you focus on? What are the KPIs you put in place in order to know that you're making the progress you expected? NPS was one, but I'm sure there's very different measures.
We're actually experimenting with a new methodology called underlying business value. So we have put a business value on IT service. And this isn't limited to our Oracle environment. This is across all of IT. And we're really saying if we can be more seamless in how these systems perform, maybe we can do more work orders in a day, or more. Maybe we can get more widgets turned over in some other line of business. But we do use NPS as an overall modifier. So we say, okay, well, we're only having business success if it also comes with that intangible satisfaction that comes from NPS, which is like, sure, maybe you got more things done, but you felt really crappy the whole time you're doing it. That's not success. So it's a fairly complicated methodology we've worked through, but we think it's going to be powerful. We're just coming up to our first year where we'll take a fixed measurement, but we're really excited about it.
Yeah. So let me piggyback on a couple of things. So for us, I came up through the HR space and in the finance space, so I have an interesting perspective right now. So this literally happened last week, and they said, one of our finance people said, well, we want our employees to clock in their cost center, their job code, and all of a sudden today they just swipe their badge and they're in. And I said, well, that's nice for you, but that doesn't help them, okay? And so we look at a number of things, because one of our biggest drivers in our business is labor cost, and we see it right away. Every day our store directors see our labor cost. And labor costs could be doing administrative work, when in fact, I'm sure all of you, when you're wanting to get out of a checkout line in a grocery store, you want to get out, okay? And if they're in the back office trying to unload packages, or they're trying to scan invoices or do that is complete waste of time for our customers. So we've gone to a lot of imaging. And again, it was just, you just image it, to your point, you image it, we'll fix it, we'll figure it out. Don't let them do that, because they should be focusing on our customers. So our KPIs are obviously, for the back offices, can we close the books on time, right? Because, when we started this project, we were at about 5-6 days. We're now at 4.5 days. And a company our size, we process basically 34 million invoices a year, 80,000 a week, a day. So the volume is just tremendous. But really our focus is always about getting our associates dealing with the customers and making it so that they don't have to do that administrative work. And so the KPIs are overtime, close time, those kind of things. And we measure those every day.
And do you put those at the end as your North Star, saying we're going to achieve 4.5 days to close, like you mentioned, and then you just make sure that you're on the right track? Or are you thinking about it more in terms of short-term measures of success, so you know that you're going to make it?
So my team will hate me on this one. So the North Star was the 4.5 days. Now I want to close every week. I want to do a soft close every week. And everybody's like, you can't do that. I said, sure I can. I have data right now. Now it's not a hard close. And so I always want to try to see what can I get ahead, because it seems like that week of close, everybody's working their tails off. When in fact, if you were doing this a little bit at a time, you'd get better at it. So that to me is where I can do a soft close every week, and that's not common in many of our businesses. So the North Star was the 4.5 days, and now it's like, how can I improve that?
Yeah, because I think if I compare what Naveed and you, Greg, said, you sort of have a view of what you're trying to achieve, whether it's NPS, or whether it's number of days to close, etc. And you're trying to get there incrementally. Is that by design, or is that because you have to?
You're not going to get to the right KPIs in the first go. Like you talk about being structured, this is very unstructured, because at times you're looking at these KPIs and setting them in isolation. And in some places you are actually collaboratively coming up with these KPIs. And what you need to be able to do very quickly is learn from your failures and adjust very quickly to, hey, we thought we'll be able to do this in 4.5 days. Now the data is proving that it's only going to, best case possible is 2 days. You got to adjust those KPIs. So learning fast from your failures through the process is a key element in how you actually move forward.
Yeah. And Greg, what about you? Is that iterative, or are you?
Oh, it's absolutely.
Do you have a game plan? You're
It's
saying, I'm going to do 7 days today, and I'm going to do 6 days tomorrow.
One day I'll get to a 1-day close, but that's. But it is constant. It's constant, continuous improvement. Yep. You're always looking. You're readjusting. If you, I remember when I was doing payroll at one time, it's like, well, our KPI is that I pay people. Well, that's your job, right? And so that KPI to me was worthless, because you had to pay people right. You had to pay them on time. So why are we measuring that? Because that's the expectation of the job. So then we had to change it to say, okay, how many errors do we have in our payroll, right? How many times do people have to call us because we didn't calculate something right? I have the same thing for invoices. How many times do I have to redo an invoice? How many times do I have to do manual invoices? And so we're always looking at, okay, you look at the big ones, and then once you get those down, you go after the ones you forgot or put to the side. So you're always going after those other ones as well.
Got it. And Oliver, how is it with UHG?
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah, well, so we had a set of measures that made the business case, right? So we spent a year trying to convince the company that it needed to part with a certain amount of capital to make make this transformation happen. And so we had to be able to imagine an ROI. So we went through, because we're talking about workforce and a lot of our value comes in cost avoidance, right? So if I know the skills of my employees and I know the jobs I have open and I can match the two together, I can, one, sever fewer, right? Pay less severance costs. I can have less external hiring, which takes longer and costs more. I can improve our measure of employee sentiment, which is largely driven by our employees' ability to realize their career aspirations, which also we have statistically linked to our member and our patient net promoter scores. So we have an external value driver there. And we went in very conservative in terms of what we were expecting to be able to return. But I look forward. I mean, the comments I'm taking here, the lesson I'm taking here is I can look forward to unexpected value that I can then drive, additional KPIs or shift the focus as we begin the transformation, learn where there's new value drivers to be had. So we start with the business case, trying to prove that out, which is our accountability, and we look forward to learning new.
Sarah?
I think that beyond, in month or in quarter measurements, we've really got to go back to our purpose, right? In our case, energy transition, to help save the planet. And for that kind of thing, you have to say, okay, well, you're not going to pick a KPI for that. And then we've all set very lofty targets and goals, but we have to more say, does this modern application actually build the pathway and platform? So for instance, we're about to go live shortly on the new customer care and billing cloud product and come off of a 30-year-old COBOL customized, we can't be nimble with that world. Yeah. But with the new one, we can be very nimble, and that'll be what helps us enable, microgrid billing, new sources of energy to the grid, rapid changes in time of use billing. You can't get there without getting these kind of basic platforms in place. So I think that's the other part of it, is we got to look beyond next week or next quarter and really refocus. And I know down here in the States, maybe you think the North Star is cute, but up in Canada in February and -40, we might say, what's our sun destination? But yeah, we really do need to focus on those big goals.
Yeah. And how do we do it in Oracle Lab?
So we actually, within each area of transformation, we look at kind of 4 areas. One is operational efficiency. Are we saving cost? Are we able to leverage resources that we're doing things that were maybe less value add and move them to more value add activities? So efficiency is one way we measure value. Another is, are we able to make better decisions, take better actions faster? Another is around agility. Are we able to stay ahead of our customers, employees, partners' expectations? And then the final one is around the feedback that we get and delivering the experiences that those constituents that we serve are expecting from us. So within each area of transformation, whether it's finance, marketing, sales, IT, you name it, we come up with specific metrics, but they all relate back to those 4 pillars.
Yeah. So it sounds to me like there's almost a hierarchy. You have your vision, your purpose. You guys have a big one. Save the planet, okay? We're all for that.
We've all got it, all shared.
Yeah, I think we'll share that. Then it's the sun or the North Star or whatever it is based on where you are. But then you break it down further and you try and say, okay, how do I get there? And it's more incremental, right? So taking that into account, now that you've been doing this for a while, Sarah, I'd like to start with you. What are some of the things that you've achieved already? What are the have you met those targets? Have you managed to deliver the value?
Yeah, for sure. And we've done it through, we're into the Oracle stack, kind of top to bottom, HR, finance, supply chain, OAC, OIC, OCI, Oracle Field Services, customer care and billing.
She's got a list of acronyms.
It's like, oh my goodness.
I didn't understand half of them.
But what we're doing is we're trying to say from the earlier projects, what have we learned from them that's making the future projects work? And one of the ones I love the most is we created a whole new set of jobs, and it goes back to one of the earlier questions. with a COBOL system, every comma you want to add to a list has to come through an IT ticket. But obviously with these cloud-based apps, now you get business admin layer separate from the IT layer. Down in IT, we can add more space or write an integration, but in the business admin layer, you can change the payroll tax. You can, add a drop-down box. You have all this power linked directly to the business outcome. And so I think it's possibly intangible. I'm not exactly sure how to measure it, but by creating a group of people that are that tech savvy that they can make those changes, we've all the things we talked about earlier, collaboration, speed, better technical, taking advantage of the technology because you understand it within the business. All kinds of benefits accrue from that.
Yeah. And Greg, do you want to talk us through your stages and what you feel, what value you've delivered already?
Sure. So for example, part of it is convincing people it's the right thing to do, right? And it's always show me. And so when we went live, everybody was like, hey, I'm comfortable with my older system. It works. It's not broken. And so getting people to the new system with us was ERP, Oracle ERP. And as I said earlier, they were doubting Thomases. And now that I've got them there, it's like, what's next? Mm-hmm. They're now pulling versus us pushing. And so can Oracle do this? And I've got some great clients that I work with, a support team from Oracle, and they say, oh yeah, I've got a solution for that, okay? Before I used to have to do an RFP, I used to have to go all over the place, and now my first thing is, okay, Oracle, do you have this? And it's just a matter of a licensing. It's not a big push, to add an application. It's more of a licensing issue. And that's a flip of a switch. And so I'm getting a lot more folks engaged to say, oh, frankly, I had to slow them down, okay? Because they're like, I like this. I can get my data fast. I have self-service, and to your point, I have the digital assistant, and they're all asking for stuff because now they know it's, to your point earlier, it's configuration. I don't have to go to IT and spend all this cost for one, implementing a new system, getting servers in place. So I've got a lot more people pulling versus us pushing.
That's great. So we're a little bit short on time. So what I was hoping we can do is just get your advice, as if we haven't gotten any so far. But if you had one piece of advice for me and the rest of the audience here, what would it be? If you're approaching a big transformation, what would you do? Or what wouldn't you? Sarah, do you want to kick us off?
If it's a big transformation, plan. Plan. Sort of like real estate location.
It's like people are agreeing with you.
Yeah, that's it. That's my rapid fire advice. Plan.
Well, it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
More than one word. And Oliver, from your perspective?
So maybe slightly more inspirational than plan. I don't know. I would encourage each of you to really think big, dream big about what the possibilities are, but be careful to manage your expectations, right? So it's important to inspire people to think about what's possible through the lens of your consumer, however you define that. And then it is incredibly important to manage expectations because nothing will go the way that you plan, but your plan then allows you to adjust, right? So
that's okay, you can replan.
Yeah, then you can replan. That would be it for me, thanks.
Yeah, that's great. And Naveed, for your perspective?
For me, it always starts and ends with people. You got to get your people motivated, you got to get them upskilled, and you got to really, really celebrate their successes. So invest in the people, because if you have the right talent within the organization, they can move mountains. Inspiration can come, you can have plans, but don't underestimate the time it is going to take you to train these individuals in the organization who are hungry to transform, but then they're also very scared that they can be kind of like now out of a job. So investing in your people, in their skills, is very necessary.
Right.
Well, I'll piggyback a little bit off that. Change management. That is the number one thing that you consider. It's not an IT project, it's not a business project, it's a company transformation. And you got to have everybody on board. I can't say enough about over-communicating. When we did our recent ERP project, we had 3 legs. We had the configuration, the integration, and change management. That change management was there day one, talking to people, explaining things, getting their fingers on the keys so they could see what was happening. And by them because usually, I came from the old world where you saw it 2 weeks before you went live, right? Maybe 3, okay? Our folks saw it a year ahead.
Wow.
So they saw the system right away so they could get comfortable with it. Because once they get comfortable, the change management becomes a lot easier.
Great. And Leah?
Okay, yes to everything that was just said, but I'll add.
Good advice, right?
Where we've seen the most value is when we've not just looked at how do we move, but how do we think about the people, the process, and the systems? And specifically, how do we streamline the experience for whoever it is that we're serving, those constituents I talked about? Then how do we empower them? How do we create an experience where no manual intervention is needed? And then can you take it one step further and think about how you delight them? And then we think about the automation, and then it's this continuous loop. We're always getting feedback, always look at the quarterly updates and see how do we further streamline, empower, delight, and then leverage the automation.
Excellent, thanks so much. We're going to try and see if there's any questions from the audience.
We got a question.
You got a question?
We have 4 that all relate to the topic of adoption.
Why did you talk us through it?
Well, I think the question is, and maybe we'll start with folks over here before I can kind of give the Oracle answer. How do you drive adoption? How do you get folks excited to leverage the new technology? How do you get users using it in the right ways? So the topic of adoption is what 4 of these questions are all about.
So I'll start. It goes back to fingers on keys. Okay, you don't know it until you see it, you touch it. It's all abstract. And so, you know, there's a conference room pilot, I think, which is an Oracle acronym, right? And that's what I talked about, where people had access a year early. Adoption, all of a sudden, when they were able to see it, feel it, touch it, the adoption was immensely easier. Okay, because they could see the screens, they could move around, and it's like a new phone, right? You kind of go, oh, until then when you start playing with it, you get it. But if you don't, if it's in abstract, people just can't relate.
Okay. For Leah, for me, it comes down to the business impact and the use cases that you were able to do before in production. Can you actually do them better with the new technology that you're adopting? And have you actually reduced the friction and the time it takes to get it? That's when you see people adopting. And I would say, don't boil the ocean. Take 1 or 2 or 3 use cases, test them, get them validated with your employees and your partners first before you move forward.
Maybe building on Greg's comment about fingers on keyboards, we're trying to figure out ways to get our consumers involved in the test of design. So it's not even the product functionality or the technology functionality, but it's actually getting their input and their experience through what we are changing and what that may look like before we configure a system and deploy it. Then we will heavily use the fingers on keyboard approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And just building on all of that, you have to have the people who do the job in the team. I would say in terms of stakeholder groups in a utility, one of the toughest audiences is field services type employees. Even before COVID, we were dispatching direct from home, so they're not coming to the office for a briefing. Right. And so you do have to create opportunities, forums and town halls where they can get that feedback in, and we have to listen quite rapidly in the first 2 weeks of rollout. If the field is phoning on something, we really have to be tracking that through the service desk and see, what's the underlying thing and what can we change quickly, because you don't want these people slowing down. You don't want them not getting to the next call on time. If it's a no heat furnace call, again, this Canadian thing, you might not realize that in Las Vegas, but negative 40 with no heat, you need your furnace tech, and you need him or her now.
Right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time obviously testing, doing a lot of user testing, but as soon as it goes live, you never know what will come up. So the other things that we do are we leverage guided learning, which is especially helpful where there are policy complications, where we want folks to understand how to get through a process like sales, where there are certain policies that our sales reps have to follow, or as an example, in the performance management for managers, there are some policies they have to keep in mind. So using the guided learning enables us to give the information just in time so folks can get through the system. But we do try to find ways to empower and delight with an intuitive experience that's better than what they had before. So they want to adopt it, like you said.
So look, I just want to thank everyone. I hope you've enjoyed this and learned a little bit, and I just want to say thank you for making my life so easy, for just sharing with us your experiences. I really appreciate you coming over. Thank you so much.
Thanks for including us.